This video is brought to you by Kinhank, your next level retro game console online shop. If you're interested in picking up mini PCs, retro game consoles, gamepads, or other electronic accessories at great prices, this site has got you covered. Click the link in the description below for more details. Hey guys, VicHD here. Now this is a video that I've been wanting to do for quite some time. There's this channel called Geography Now. It's an educational channel that talks about countries in alphabetical order according to the United Nations. I've been following this channel for many years, and I wanted to help out with the Venezuela episode. I actually got in contact with the main creator here, Paul Barbado, Barbie, or Barbs, however you want to call him. I asked him if I could help out, and I was able to chip in with some research in regards to the information that he was looking for. I wanted to participate more into the episode, but I guess it was kind of cut for time, and he had other people also involved in the episode, so I managed to at least put my part in the episode, even though I wasn't directly credited. The whole point is just to help out for a good cause. So I wanted to do this reaction video just to fill in that extra context that was missing from the episode. Most of the stuff I sent him, he did use, but he also used information from other sources. Let's see how it turns out.
Our last and final South American country. So we've done this before. If Latin America was a family, you got the main characters like Mexico, who's like the kingpin big boss with his Central American sidekicks. Colombia is like the popular uncle who does all the talking. Peru is in the kitchen making the best food while Ecuador is reading a book quietly. Argentina and Uruguay are sipping wine, looking all bougie, but between them, only Uruguay actually is rich. DR and PR are fighting, but then they make up. Cuba's just watching the fight. Bolivia and Paraguay are not speaking Spanish, while Chile is speaking Spanish, but no one can understand them. And then we get to Venezuela, Colombia's fraternal twin sister, the hot girl with problems of Latin America. Welcome to Venezuela.
It's time to learn geography now!
Hey everybody, I'm your host Barbs. Get your geography.
I should also point out, Joanna Hausman is of course one of the many comedians that currently lives in the US, but has talked about how Venezuelan culture is in general. So she does have her own channel. She was going to mention it too. So I recommend that if you want to see a funny girl, a comedian who's open about her culture and proud about who she is and where she came from, she's your go-to gal. I recommend you check it out too.
Geography Now merch like this Geography Now shirt or this Geography Now drawstring bag at geographynow.com. Not selling out if it's your brand. Oh, and what's this? You can also get a Geography Now figurine at figgyme.com. It's me in figurine form. He's been on quite a few adventures. If you can tell, I broke his neck and his head fell off. I need a new one. I'm gonna have to order it at figgyme.com. I really wanted to visit Venezuela to get on-location footage for this episode, but unfortunately the visa process takes a lot longer for American citizens. Like I would have to go to Mexico to get the visa, and it's a complicated process. So if I can't go to Venezuela, the best thing to do is bring Venezuela to me.
Yeah, to point out some embassies here, like the US Embassy and the Canadian Embassy, they've closed down for years. I think the Canadian Embassy closed like around 2010, 2011, around that time. Whereas the US Embassy closed like around 2019. It was roughly around the time of the national blackout, 2019. It was a mess.
Me. And the best way to do that is to have a Venezuelan help me co-host this episode. And I cannot think of anyone better than this person. Some of you guys already know her. Say hi to Joanna Hausman.
Oh my God, it's me. Venezuela.
How did we meet each other?
YouTube. I saw your videos. You saw my videos.
I saw you. I think I saw you first, actually. I think I saw you on Flama.
Yes.
And you did all the accents of the Spanish world, or Spanish-speaking world. And
yeah, and now we're here.
It was like 5 years ago. Would you like to be in the Venezuela episode? We kept the promise.
We kept the promise.
We kept the promise. Joanna, just quickly, anything you want to say to your fellow Venezuelans out there?
Vamos a darle esta vaina.
Vamos a darle.
Vamos a darle esta vaina. Yes. I've been living in Caracas for many years, though I actually grew up in Puerto Ordaz in the state of Bolívar, so that's like in the southeast part of the country. But, I traveled a lot. My dad was a pilot back when he was when he was alive. He unfortunately passed away in 2017. But I managed to get an English-speaking accent because I lived about 11 years or so in Florida, and I've been living in Caracas, I think, for about 25 years now.
We'll explain that in a bit.
Yeah. first off, most people will say Venezuela got its name from the Italian verb Venezuela, which was what the navigator Americo Vespucci called it when he saw stilt houses of the natives, and it reminded him of Venice.
From there, Venezuela was colonized by the Spanish, and long story short, independence, followed by the 19th century, you know, the whole Simon Bolivar thing. We talked about it many
Everyone
times.
talks about it. Actually, for me,
To point out, Simon Bolivar, of course, we call him the liberator. He is the founding father of the country, and his name is practically everywhere. I mean, we have a phrase here where it's we say when we see something is everywhere, we say hasta en la sopa, like it's in the soup even. Because Bolivar's name, it's in the currency, it's in the name of the streets, it's in the name of plazas, it's in the name of historical sites, locations. It's practically everywhere. Bolivar it has made such an impact over the years. It's crazy. I mean, it's even to the point where the current government, the current leftist government, just doesn't shut up about Bolivar. They just don't let him rest in peace. I respect Bolivar, but right now, his name is just being dragged through the mud for the wrong reasons.
many in Venezuela, though, Francisco de Miranda might be considered a more notable key figure for Venezuelan independence. His name is even on the Arc de Triomphe.
Yes, when it comes to Venezuela, Francisco de Miranda, he's usually seen as like the first Venezuelan of the country, the one that actually helped liberate. But there was some backstage treason, you could say, politically. Since Miranda wasn't exactly born in Venezuela, he was born in the Canary Islands. And he moved to Venezuela and he participated in Venezuela's independence, as well as getting himself incorporated with many wars. I think it was during the Napoleonic Wars too. But there was a lot of backstage politics, a lot of political backstabbing, essentially. And well, he was eventually turned into the Spanish during the War for Independence. It's a very rough, convoluted story.
Paris, I don't want to brag.
True fact. After a bunch of interesting chapters, even one where they formed a big-ass Megatron country called Gran Colombia with Colombia, Ecuador, and Panama, they eventually became the Venezuela that we know today.
Let's find it on the globe now in the motion graphic, shall we? I love motion graphic. It's the best type of graphic, the motion one.
First of all, Venezuela is located on the northern part of the South American continent. It has a coast mostly on the Caribbean Sea that holds somewhere around 70 or so islands and islets. Fun side note, see this little peninsula here? It's the site of the first place Christopher Columbus set foot on in the South American continent. The country is divided into 23 states, each with their own flag, as well as federal dependencies, which...
I should point out that, okay, there's a state here at the bottom right called Vargas. In more recent times, that state has been renamed into La Guaira, because that's usually the city within that state. It was a decision that was made a few years ago. It was kind of a controversial decision because everyone associates that state as La Guaira, despite it being called Vargas, so that caused a bit of confusion. Regardless, the state now is called La Guaira. So I'm kind of against it, but whatever. Might as well roll with it.
Are collectively the 70 or so islands off the coast that act as one unit and one capital district for the capital, Caracas. Caracas is not only the largest city, but it also has the busiest airport, Simon Bolivar International, which is kind of inconveniently located across an entire mountain pass from the actual city of Caracas, but hey, it is what it is.
The Simon Bolivar International Airport, the location is called Maiquetía. Internationally, it's associated with Caracas, and that usually means that we have to go like past that mountain range that we call El Ávila. That usually takes like about roughly an hour drive, depending on how far you are. Trying to get through all the mountain range, the tunnels, the bridges. Right now it's not much of a problem, but years ago, some of the bridges did have to go through some reconstruction phases. That was like around 2007, 2008.
From there, the second and third largest cities are Maracaibo and Valencia. However, the second and third busiest airports are Barcelona and Maracaibo. Caracas, Maracaibo, and Valencia are the only three cities with a city metro rail.
Yeah, the subway system here is pretty extensive. It could essentially take you to like the other side of town if you want. You could take the subway station to one part of the city, and it has like 3, 4, 5 branches. It's kind of complex, and it's still growing, particularly in Caracas. So Those familiar with like very complex subway stations, this is kind of going there in that direction. It's getting more complicated. But I think due to financial reasons, things, well, the quality, the service, it hasn't been that well in more recent times, mainly because of the whole political situation right now. It used to be a sign of pride from the country itself, from the people living in the city. But since the quality has deteriorated so much in the subway system that there will be occasional, like, let's say, blackouts. Sometimes the trains won't work properly. Sometimes the air conditioning won't work properly. They just don't care about hygiene. They don't care about the quality or the preservation of the subway service here, the metro. That's what we call it here.
Otherwise, the country has a national rail system with some lines operating passenger cars, others solely for freight and transport. Whereas roadways extend to all parts of the country. However, keep in mind, much of the country south of the Orinoco River is comprised of sparsely inhabited rainforests and national parks with no road access, and certain communities in these areas are only accessible by riverboat or bush plane. Some anomalies, see this weird guy right here? It's called the Paraguaná Peninsula, and technically it's classified as a tide island. As you can see, it's connected by a very narrow isthmus or tombolo called Médanos, which is a skinny, marshy sandbank only about half a mile or 1.2 kilometers wide.
Half a mile, 1.2. That's kind of sketchy. It's 1.2, but it's not exactly half a mile. So there was a miscalculation there. But it is a narrow stretch.
Nonetheless, some people just call this peninsula Cora Island. If you go to the northwestern border with Colombia, it's kind of quirky because Venezuela really doesn't want to share the eponymously named Gulf of Venezuela. Upon agreements, Venezuela would keep everything along the coast up to the Cocinetas Lagoon. That meant that they would have a super narrow border on the La Guajira Peninsula, sometimes reaching only about 2 miles wide at its narrowest. And finally, Venezuela has a dispute with Guyana over the Essequibo region, or as the Venezuelans call it, Guiana Essequiba. This entire area is claimed by Venezuela, even though it is de facto administered by the country of Guyana and makes up about 2/3 of everything Guyana claims is theirs. This is a complicated one. We'll explain more about it later.
By the way, yeah, Caracas really loves itself. So there's this saying, Venezuela es Caracas, el resto es Monte Culebra.
Does that mean like everybody pretty much outside of Caracas doesn't like Caracas? Or
No, it just means that the city is just the country as a whole is mostly a jungle. While the capital is like the go-to place to find a job, make money, that kind of thing. Everything else is kind of ignored. I mean, it's kind of it's kind of said as a joke. But the fact that the whole place is kind of like a jungle in a sense is that it just shows how dangerous and how majestic the place is, as well as how rough and how we managed to survive through this type of a country. But mainly all the climates. So there's a lot of hot, cold, wet, and dry locations.
they hate Caracas?
I mean, it's not that they hate Caracas, but I think that Caracas thinks that they're like la última Coca-Cola del desierto.
Right. The last Coke of the desert. That means like we use that phrase to talk about like something that we prioritize. Like they think like they're the best of the best.
Which means like the last Coca-Cola in the desert.
It's a big city complex. Like every country has one.
Yes, yeah. And Caracas for sure.
Yeah, lots of stuff going on regionally in Venezuela, which means let's jump back to the complicated topic, the Essequibo dispute. What is this whole thing and why is it even a thing?
Well, it has a lot of layers to it, but basically it goes back to the 1899 Arbitral Award, which established the borders between Venezuela and British Guiana, which is now Guyana.
Oh, that whole thing was just an Anglo-Russian conspiracy. Plus, it didn't count because the USA was standing in as our representative.
Okay, yeah, but we both asked the USA and Russia to step in and Russia to be the judge.
It doesn't matter because our Constitution already stated that our land pertains to those claimed by the Captaincy General of Venezuela from 1777.
Yeah, and that claim also included the other lands that are now part of Colombia and Brazil, but you relinquished those claims, so why not this one?
Guys, can I say something?
No!
Well, technically, I was the first outsider to colonize this area.
Oh, shut up!
Wait, so, okay, let me get this straight. Both of you were once under the colonial powers of Spain and Great Britain, right?
Right.
And both of you inevitably decided you no longer wanted to be ruled by your former colonial rulers.
Right.
But when it comes to this area, you want to claim legitimacy to the colonial claimed borders?
Right.
Okay, carry on.
This inevitably led to the Geneva Agreement in 1966, which stated that the two sides would try to work on something. But if no resolution was settled upon, by default, the region would remain under administration of the government of Guyana until one was made.
And so far, none has been made.
At the end of the day, if you ask most Venezuelans, they'll probably say something like, yeah, okay, I guess it should be ours. I mean, we even have a saying, El sol de Venezuela nace en el Esequibo, Venezuela's sun rises from the Esequibo, but like, it's just not the most important thing on our minds daily, you know what I mean? There's other problems.
Yeah, and it's hard because today there's like generations of everybody that's lived there. They've been English-speaking Guyanese people, so it's like, what now? What do you want to do? Do you seriously want to consider invading and reconquering it, or what? Like, because...
Okay, to explain the whole Essequibo thing, historically speaking, that territory was always from Venezuela. It was always claimed by Venezuela. The thing is that ever since British Guiana became Guyana, to be more precise, things got more complicated. We've always claimed that territory, that Essequibo territory. But the thing is that we let other people do it instead of us claiming it for ourselves. Historically speaking, this was ours, but we should have acted on this sooner. And since Guyana became independent roughly in the 60s, we kind of lost that opportunity. We still claim the land, but at this point it's a lost cause. And this is directly from Venezuela.
That's going to open up a whole other new thing. Is it worth it? I don't know.
But of course, the government kind of conveniently brings it up as a big deal whenever some kind of campaign comes along to create some kind of external issue to deflect from the domestic problems. Oh, wow, I wonder where we've...
Also, I should point out, in 2004, Hugo Chavez was, I think, asked about the whole thing with the Essequibo, and he considered the whole thing to be like a finished discussion, like it was a lost cause. Then in 2014, roughly around that time, oil was discovered in the coastline, which renewed the whole discussion over the border. And in more recent times, we were going through that whole situation with like this referendum, where we were trying to encourage people to vote for this referendum and say that this territory is ours. It was mostly bragging rights. I didn't participate in the referendum at all. It's just mostly for political reasons, and also because there's some elections in the following months, probably later this year, and they probably using that as an excuse to delay the elections. This is just me seeing it from that perspective.
We've seen that before.
Malvinas!
Yeah, we don't want this to be like another Falkland Islands, Malvinas type of war.
In any case, Venezuela has always kind of had unique, confusing, quirky parts throughout its history.
Oh my god, just like my childhood. For example, it has the very first city in South America founded by Europeans, New Cadiz, and it was destroyed by a hurricane.
Also in Venezuela, you can find the site of the short-lived largest German colony in the Americas. That was a weird one.
Yeah. And for over 50 years, we used our own half-hour offset time zone at UTC minus 430. But then they switched it back again in 2009, but then back again to UTC 4 in 2016. It literally made watching TV impossible.
Yeah, the time zone is a mess. I mean, normally I'm used to having a UTC plus 4 scenario, meaning that I usually associate it with like Eastern time. Like it's 1 hour ahead of Eastern time, but then like in daylight savings time, we're pretty much like the same as Eastern time. Then when they tried to implement the whole 4:30 thing again, it was just kind of complicated. I'm just glad that they reverted back to the original time zone. And they went back and forth, but I prefer UTC plus 4.
There's so much to the story of Venezuela and its formation as a country. It's crazy.
And another thing that's crazy is the list of notable places you can check out if you are ever lucky enough to visit Venezuela. And with that, let's have Kat explain it. Take it away, Kat.
Hey everyone, hola que tal, me llamo Katy, and I'm going to tell you about some of the top sites you can see in Venezuela. You'll probably start off in the capital, Distrito Federal, also known as Caracas. So
Sometimes it's called Distrito Capital, the Federal District, Capital District. It's still the capital, whatever.
if that's the case, maybe start with Bolivar Square and the National Pantheon of Venezuela.
That's a goof up. That's actually in Colombia. That's not Bolivar Square here. That's Colombia.
In Old Town Caracas. The Pantheon has the grave of our patriot father, Simón Bolívar. The house Simón Bolívar grew up in is also a museum now. The cable car located in El Cerro del Ávila and the Galipan town, a place surrounded by pure Yaire landscape.
Yeah, Galipan, for those who don't know, it's that it's like a small town that's located on top of the mountain, like between Caracas and La Guaira. It's that mountain range in El Ávila. And of course, that cable car is of course connected to the metro, the subway system. It's all linked to that.
What is a yaire?
Como una vista bella, like a beautiful scenery. Outside of Caracas, there's quite a bit.
Yeah, the scenery is beautiful. I've been there one time. I went to like a local bar / restaurant there last year, and the view is just gorgeous. I mean, on one side you see the city, on the other side you see the coastline. It's just beautiful.
It too. Like the city of Coro, the first city created by the Spanish and its colonial building. Colonia Toal, with its German architecture and yummy locally grown strawberries with whipped.
That's actually been one of my favorite places in Venezuela. Going to Colonia Tobar. I think I've been there maybe like 5 or 6 times. It's a blast to go to. It's a small German colony. You can go there to check out the strawberries with whipped cream. It's also known for its cocoa, the hot chocolate. Also known for its, you can say barbecue, roast pork. They also make their own beers, their own liquors, like ciders, maybe I would say wines, but there is like a sort of like a location in Colonia Tobar where you can actually see them make these little brewery areas where they actually make their own wines, or I'm not really sure if they're like wines or if they're ciders, but they make alcoholic beverages, beer included.
Cream. So good. One time I went and there was a monkey behind where we ordered food, and it was the trippiest thing ever because I've never seen a monkey.
And it's like a German town.
It's so cool.
Yeah.
Temple of Virgen de Coromoto. We also have the monument of Our Lady of Peace, the tallest Mary statue.
Never
in the
been there.
world. Everyone knows Los Roques Archipelago. Isla La
I
Tortuga
have been.
and Isla Margarita. Some of the
Los Roques is a beautiful archipelago that's like farther up north. And I've only been there for like a few days, but it's just a beautiful vacation getaway. I highly recommend you going to Los Roques if you have the chance. Just beautiful to go there.
best beach resorts are there. And yes, Venezuela does have some theme parks you can check out, como Parque Diverland, Montaña de los Sueños, Aquaventura Park, Parque Temático Armando de Ron, which by the way has a
Armando Reverón. I'm not sure. I haven't really heard of that theme park. Not sure what area exactly. But they did mention Margarita Island. I actually lived there for like a good 9 months. It's a great place to visit, not to stay there, because that's a place made exclusively for tourists. Because if you try to live there, it gets kind of problematic.
huge iguana. And lastly, we have Los Aleros, which is a historical theme park. It has old-style Venezuelan houses. La Gran Sabana and Los Tipuis, which some say are giant trees that reach to the heavens cut by the gods. And that's why they look like tree trunks. We'll talk about the Tipuis later on in the episode. And of course, the #1 landmark, top tourist site, Canaima, where you can go to Angel Falls, the highest and uninterrupted waterfall in the world, nearly
A little over 900
so there you have
meters,
it, guys.
maybe 910,
Venezuela is
980.
truly a treasure trove of breathtaking sights. There's something here for everyone. Hasta luego.
By the way, she's Enoch's fiance, so she's taken. Heads up. See you guys later. Thank you, Kat. Yes, Venezuela is loaded with natural beauty, and much of it is very well preserved.
Luckily for you, we are now going to discuss that in the next segment. There's a song everyone in Venezuela knows that's called Venezuela. That's a very appropriate name. The lyrics pretty much describe the land. Soy desierto, selva, nieve y volcán. I'm desert, jungle, snow, and volcano.
But Venezuela takes its natural diversity to a whole new level and
I mean, it's pretty diverse, but contrary to what the lyrics say, there are no volcanoes in Venezuela. I mean, there are some arguments here and there that say that probably the mountain range that we have in Avila, or maybe the Andes, maybe they were probably dormant volcanoes. It's really hard to say. So far, it's just speculation. But it's neat how this is a country so full of wonder and danger and marvel. You just don't know what else to expect. And the song itself is about it's about saying that if I ever get shipwrecked, I hope to get shipwrecked in this country because it's just so fascinatingly beautiful. That's basically the whole point of the lyrics.
Suddenly you have strange ecoregions that are found nowhere else on Earth.
But first, let's discuss the physical makeup in the motion graphic, shall we?
First of all, the country has 5 main physical regions. From the west, you have the Maracaibo lowlands, which has the largest lake of the country, Lake Maracaibo, which is more like a brackish water lagoon as it has a small, narrow, open strait that connects to the Caribbean Sea. All these lowlands are sandwiched between the Perijá and Mérida mountain ranges, which is essentially the beginning of the Andes Mountains. In the Mérida range, you can find the tallest peak of the country, Pico Bolivar, nearly 5,000 meters high. Just east of that, along the north coast, you have the Venezuela coastal range, which has the largest closed-off natural lake, Lake Valencia. From there, the entire center of the country is a super flat region known as the Orinoco Basin, or the Los Llanos. This area is where most of the agriculture is concentrated, fed by the largest river, the Orinoco, and its tributaries emptying into the Atlantic at the Orinoco Delta. Here you can find the largest man-made lake, the Guri Reservoir. From there, the southern part of the country is covered in one of the most unique landscapes ever, the Guiana Highlands.
Also, just to point out, this area where we have the Guri Lake, that's where the dam is. That's the electric dam, like one of the biggest electric dams, maybe in South America. But yeah, this place got really problematic in 2019, causing a national blackout that affected most of the country.
This area is packed with the largest concentration of tepuis in all of South America. They are isolated, tropical, tabletop mountains with sharp vertical cliffs. These two are the largest ones area-wise. However, the most famous one is probably Aywan Tepui in the Bolivar state, which has the highest unobstructed waterfall in the world, Angel Falls, which is nearly 1 kilometer high.
So if there are two things that sum up the uniqueness of Venezuela, it would have to be the Tepuis and the Maracaibo region.
So first off, Tepuis, which means the house of the gods in the Pemon language, are some of the oldest rock formations on Earth and have some of the most unique endemic flora and fauna.
So think of it like this. The flat tops of the Tepuis are isolated from the ground forest, which effectively makes them ecological islands. If you climb up to the top of them, it looks totally different from the ground below with different plant species.
Did you ever see the Pixar movie Up?
Yes, yes.
That was inspired off of the Angel Falls in the Tepuis region in Venezuela.
Yeah, going back for a little bit.
The movie Up?
Yes, yes.
That was inspired off of the Angel Falls in the
I mean, you can see the comparison. Yeah, I did see the movie. The movie is really good. I highly recommend it. There are also other movies that were filmed here. So, of course, Up being the more recent example of a movie that's filmed mainly in the jungles, like the beauty behind, let's say, the country as a whole. There have been other movies that actually not just reference the country, but were actually filmed in parts of the country. I don't know if anyone remembers this old movie called Jungle to Jungle with Tim Allen, where apparently he had this kid and the mother actually raised him in the Amazon jungle in Venezuela. That's one movie. Another movie was actually Arachnophobia, and yeah, that is a movie about spiders, fear of spiders and all that. Supposedly it originated again in the jungle. I think there was another movie called Dragonfly. I think it was a Kevin Costner movie, if I'm not mistaken. But it had something to do with like some kind of like it had something to do with dragonflies, spirituality, and something like that. Some kind of a message that a fallen loved one left for the main protagonist to find out more about. Kind of a weird story.
Tepuis region in Venezuela.
Then you have the very strange thing around the Lake Maracaibo region at the mouth of the Catatumbo River.
Dude, you have the Relámpago del Catatumbo, a weird atmospheric phenomenon that creates the most massive and concurrent thunderstorms in the world. On average, about 2/3 of the year can have lightning activity with up to 1.5 million strikes.
Many say that this is because the lake is situated in the narrow corridor of land between the tall mountains, which funnels cool mountain air mixing in with the vast, humid, swampy airs by the lake. It's the perfect conditions to make a perpetual storm.
Perpetual storm, that is the name of my memoir. In any case, there's so
it's been said also that Catatumbo lightning has kind of been used as like a lighthouse for explorers, like in the 1800s, 1700s. Very interesting story. I looked it up one time and it was on a TED Ed video, but very fascinating.
much more to Venezuela's land, resources, and how the country manages it all.
And with that, it's time for my triple shot of espresso break. And I don't know if you like espresso, Joanna, but we're going to do it anyway.
We're going to do it.
And that means Noah takes over the rest of this segment. Noah, take it away.
Take it away.
Ladies and gentlemen, let's get ready to rumble. It's just me. Alright, so let's discuss a very heavy and complex topic, Venezuelan resources and economy. First off, the number one thing everyone correctly thinks of, petroleum. Discovered in the 1910s during the Juan Vicente Gomez 27-year-long dictatorship, and that's a whole other story. Venezuela has the largest proven oil reserves in the world. If you look at the hydrocarbon map, most of the oil is found in the Orinoco Belt in the East Venezuelan basin, which extends offshore. And most of the rigs and wells are managed by the PDVSA, which is the world's 5th largest oil exporter. This means the government is in charge of a sector that contributes over 90% of all exports. That's a big deal. Of course, due to the heavily state-subsidized industry, this also means they have the least expensive petroleum sold publicly. As of 2023, it was about 2 cents per liter or about 8 cents per gallon. That's a good deal. So yeah, that was...
Just for a little context, even, let's say, local gasoline here, that's kind of rationed in a point, in a sense, to the point that there are people that have to, like, wake up very early in the morning just to fill their car up with gasoline for a very cheap price. However, we also have the alternative of paying for gasoline, but at international prices. Really, depending on the vehicle, I think filling up the gas tank would be like the equivalent of maybe $20 international gasoline. If it's like a standard car, $20. If it's maybe a bigger car or truck or van, maybe $50, $60. It really depends. But if you want to find a cheaper alternative, you have to know your way around the city and figure out which ones are the ones that are selling the cheaper gasoline.
Was one of the only few commodities Venezuelans didn't have to worry about too much during the hyperinflation crisis. And since then, so many things have happened. Like in 2014, rationing programs began. Everything from food to utilities. Every Venezuelan remembers when they would get those...
Everything has been rationed at that point. It was ridiculous. Food was being rationed. Toilet paper was being rationed. Other basic needs, let's say cooking oil, also rationed. And then we have this called a caja, which is a sort of a government program where they offer a box full of food. It's supposed to be like an economic alternative, but not everyone is happy with this.
Clap ration boxes. In 2007, Corporal Elect was formed by merging 16 state-owned and private electric companies managed by a general in the army. This guy...
Yeah, the funny thing about this guy, he was the one that was involved in the whole electrical blackout scenario. For many years, every time when there was like a general, not a general blackout, but a blackout in certain sectors of the country, he would usually say that it was sabotage. No, it was sabotage from the opposition, or that some animal like ate the cables or something. Always finding like some excuse to explain the motives or the reasons for why the failure happened. Then the blackout happened, and for many days we were trying to figure out a solution to all this. And then internally, the current government administration, they said, you know what, this isn't working, you're fired, I'm going to hire an actual engineer. And that's what happened.
Okay. And he announced that the electric companies would reset their debts with their users. Then the government tried to regulate food and basic needs with a biometric fingerprint system, but today it's only used in gas stations that have regulated super cheap prices.
It's just that, I should also point out here, after the blackout, we had no choice but to regulate the usage of the US dollar. We had to circulate that currency because everyone was running out of money. The country was in a panic. We were in a huge blackout. No one could access the banks. So the only alternative was to take out money where you don't have it, or your own personal savings. Some people had to resort to taking out their dollars that they saved up to use them in case of an emergency, myself included. So right now it is unofficially accepted in the country. Just that be careful with the actual bills, because people can get really picky with the quality of the dollar bills here. Because if it's written in ink, if it's crumpled, if it's ripped, people are not going to accept it. So it has to be in a good quality condition. Also, it has to be bills, no coins. Right? No pennies, no nickels, no dimes, no quarters. I'm sorry. Because we already use our local currency as like petty change at this point. So there's a lot of circulation with US dollars for the most part. And a lot of people use debit card. We used to use credit card, but because of sanctions, that was also disabled. So it can get a little complicated.
See, that's the thing. Yes, other industries exist in Venezuela, like mining, agriculture, and electronics, but they are not at a very sustainable level. And for the longest time, the country had been hyper-dependent on its oil wealth. There are so many factors that played into this whole thing, and there is no one single answer. It was so bad that people started weighing blocks of bolivars rather than counting them. Money became so undervalued that people would literally sell handicrafts made of the worthless bolivar banknotes that costed more than the...
Yes, this actually happened. Let me put it this way. Toilet paper had more value than our currency. That's how bad it got. Imagine paying for a 2-liter bottle of soda, like paying millions of dollars for a 2-liter bottle of soda. It got ridiculous. People were literally throwing away currency in the streets because it was just so worthless. Similar scenario, I think, happened in Austria when the economy collapsed after, I think it was after World War II. It was a mess.
Paper currency. Government actions clearly
Actually,
had their
World War
effect.
I.
And one day it went
Whatever.
too far. People will say the 2019 blackout was the last straw. And from then on, the country took a different path and unofficially dollarized itself. Now in Venezuela, everyone uses US dollars, not bolivars. And since then, in a weird way, things have kind of sort of leveled out a bit. People
We do use bolivars, but more as an alternative. I mean, we accept it. We kind of have a conversion rate right now. As of this recording, the US dollar is at 36 bolivars approximately, according to the official bank. But depending on the market, it could be 38, 39, maybe 40. It all varies.
are able to safely walk the streets and live life somewhat normally now, even though the currency is not recognized. Well, clearly there is a story behind the financial crisis, but there is a beautiful, vibrant side to the nature. And
yes, apparently, one thing I should point out is that because the whole crisis, a lot of people fled the country through different ways, different routes, different methods, to the point that I think even the criminals decided to leave the country, and that kind of made the city a little safer. It's a little hard to say. I mean, what I've noticed in more recent times is that there are stores now that originally would only open up until like 7 p.m. But now they're opening a little later to like 8 or 9 p.m. So generally speaking, things have gotten kind of safer because most of the criminals, or what we call malandros, most of the thugs, they all decided to flee the country in some way, shape, or form. But that also generated this whole xenophobia where we're seen as the bad guys. Because the low class are the ones that are making the noble workers here look bad. But it's just ruining our image in general. We're not all bad. It's just that we do sometimes deal with bad apples here too, unfortunately. That's the sad truth.
And with that, we move on to our animal correspondent, Caleb.
Hello, everybody. I am here.
We're done with the Uzbekistan episode, Caleb.
Inside joke.
Venezuela! You know, sometimes when we do these episodes, we reach some countries that have very little wildlife. And sometimes we reach countries like Venezuela where there is an overwhelming avalanche of animal species. And we don't know what to do with it. We don't have enough time to pack it into the episode, but we're gonna do what we can! Venezuela is categorized as one of the world's 17 mega diverse countries in the world, and they do very well maintaining their wildlife, as the country manages 43 national parks that cover about 22% of their country's landmass. They have all different landscapes ranging from the snow-topped mountains of the Sierra Nevada to the most famous one, Canaima, which, yes, has Angel Falls. In most of these parks, you can find over 8,000 species of mammals, reptiles, and birds, many of whom are endemic, like the national bird, the Venezuelan troupial. Look at that little guy with his little black...
Yeah, that's a national bird. It's kind of like a hummingbird. You do see them sometimes. You do see other birds here, like what we call guacamayas, or macaws. We see the blue and yellow macaws here in the country too, and they freely fly around the country, around the city. Sometimes you can even feed them if you want. I've seen people actually feeding these blue macaws, and they're adorable. Occasionally, we do deal with these other birds. We call caracas. I guess they're kind of like buzzards or condors in a way. I mean, we don't really harm them, but we do see them as kind of like pests, particularly in the morning because their squawking noises they're always very irritating. And like at 6, 7 in the morning. Common occurrence here. It's almost like the equivalent of hearing a crow, a rooster, not a crow, a rooster singing in the morning.
His Glock.
His Glock. Gold and black feathers. He's so cute. Sometimes you can find them sitting on the national tree, the Arawani, matching with its golden flowers.
Araguani.
Birds of Venezuela can get really colorful or weird looking. You have everything from the weird Guinean cock of the rock that has an orange slice as a head to the yellow-knobbed curacao, sporting the jerry curls. Also kind of looks like me when I wake up in the morning. Actually, it looks like Paul when he wakes up in the morning. Remember how we talked about the tepui? Well, at the top of the tepui, you can find unique isolated species found nowhere else on Earth, like white-eared possums, long-tailed weasels, pale-throated sloths. There's even a dry sand dune area in the northwest side at the Médanos de Coro National Park, famous for their yellow-shouldered parrots. Otherwise, the list goes.
Fun fact, there is a photo of Chavez with a parrot who actually wears a red beret.
On and on and on. You can find giant anteaters, jaguars, capybaras, crabs eating foxes. Crab eating foxes.
The fox is eating the crabs.
Crabs eating Oh my god! It's the biggest crab I've ever seen. It's literally a jungle out there. Much like my life right now, balancing work and 2 kids and occasionally showing up for these Geography Now episodes. Cheers!
Thank you, Caleb. Hang in there, buddy. In any case, to talk about the food, we have one of our Venezuelan geography peeps, Miguel, to fill in. Just remember, do not call humitas and ayacas tamales, even though admittedly they do look similar. Take it away.
They do look similar in a sense, but they taste completely different. Ayacas are a common dish here. They're gift wrapped, and we serve them particularly in December, during the holiday season. But I'll let the video explain.
Call humitas and ayacas tamales, even though admittedly they do look similar. Take it away, Miguel.
Hey everyone, I'm Miguel. I'm so sorry, Noah, but it is my time to talk about food. We Venezuelans are super proud of our food. Breakfast. One of the things you will find very often is the arepa. Before leaving our homes in the morning, we usually have 1 or 2 arepas with a cup of black coffee or café con leche. We also have cachitos de jamón, which is a nice savory pastry filled with ham. Otherwise, you might find perico, which is our own version of scrambled eggs with tomato and onion. We also have a version of an empanada that is made with the same dough of the arepa but fried. And you will find tequeños everywhere. And don't call them mozzarella sticks.
Let me backtrack for a little bit. The thing is that we kind of associate empanadas to look like this. But look, there's a difference between the empanadas you normally see with flour, made by flour, and the others that are made by corn. The empanadas that you see here are made in corn. However, when we're talking about empanadas that are made with corn with regular flour, we call them pastelitos. So that's a whole different scenario. Essentially, it's the same. It's the same food. It just really depends on the ingredient being used. One is standard wheat flour. The other one uses corn flour.
We also have a version of an empanada that is made with the same dough of the arepa but fried. And you will find tequeños everywhere. And don't call them mozzarella sticks. That we eat it by hand with salsa de ajo, which is mayo with garlic sauce, or guasacaca, which is a Venezuelan version of guacamole made in a blender.
Yeah, garlic sauce, guacamole. And that is not mozzarella, by the way. That's actually like white cheese, maybe a softer cheese. Something that we call here queso guayanés, which is like a sort of a handmade cheese. Super soft, very chewy, very creamy, delicious.
You cannot talk about Venezuelan food without pabellón criollo. This is our national dish. Every region has their own way to make it, but it always includes beans, rice, shredded beef, and plátanos fritos. Now, on Christmas, we love things like hallaca, ensalada de gallina, pan de jamón.
Okay, to point out, this is what we usually associate as a Christmas dish here. Well, we have pan de jamón, that is like a ham bread that's actually like baked. It has olives, it has raisins on the inside. Sometimes you can add a bit of bacon just for additional flavor if you want. Of course, these are the ayacas that we have over here on the left. Ayacas are kind of like these little gift-wrapped meals, like gift-wrapped pies. Legend has it that the origin of the ayacas, they came from the slaves that were collecting the leftovers from their owners after they were finished eating. So they basically like wrapped all of that in a sort of a pie. They wrapped it in banana leaves and they boiled it for like a good half an hour. And from that point on, that kind of became a local Christmas tradition. Then we also have the ensalada de gallina or ensalada de pavo. Ensalada de gallina, ensalada de pollo. Sorry. Chicken salad. I didn't mean to say pavo was turkey. I meant chicken. It's usually chicken or maybe rooster, but mostly chicken. And what they mention is pernil. It would be like a pork leg, roasted pork. So we usually love to eat those in the Christmas season.
And pernil, which is a whole roasted pork leg. And for drinks, there's the liquor big three. Some of the other foods we have.
When it comes to liquor, I mean, we usually drink, we have beer, wine, rum, vodka. I mean, a lot of drinks that are usually in circulation, but we mostly, I'm a bit of a rum drinker at times. Occasionally I would drink some beers here and there, sometimes whiskey, but I'm usually like an occasional drinker. I refrain from drinking alcoholic beverages for the most part, but normally I'm a sucker for a Cuba Libre, right? Rum and Coke. That's my go-to drink.
We have pescado frito, asado negro, patacones, picandina, and yes, in some places we eat capybara.
Yeah, capybara. That's what we call chiguire over here. It's basically a rodent. I actually tried it once. It's okay, but it's not really my thing. It's only like in certain regions of the country where they actually eat capybaras. But I usually eat chicken, beef, pork, fish from time to time. But when it comes to capybaras or chiguires, I don't really... To me, it's like eating a rabbit. I just don't feel comfortable eating that kind of a rodent or that kind of a creature.
They're cute, but they're tasty. And finally, let's circle back to the most important dish of them all, the arepa. The arepa is a fat little corn cake that is used for everything. You can have it sweet, you can have it salty, you can make it like a sandwich, you can just break it. It is the best! And we invented it. So, as you can see, Venezuelan food is as varied as its people, and you will enjoy them all.
Thank you, Miguel. Well, the end of the segment. I don't have a fancy exit, so I will just say we've reached the end of the segment, but it is not the end of us.
That was weird, man.
Also, I forgot to mention, we also develop a really good coffee, and we are usually we're renowned for our best chocolate. Like the world's best chocolate from time to time. Of course, when it comes to plantains, we always have plantains most of the time. Really, it really depends on the family, and it depends on the cuisine at home. But you can actually cook plantains either when they're green or when they're yellow or black, because the darker they are, the sweeter they are. So if you cook them when they're yellow or black, then they're plátanos fritos, fried plantains. If you cook them when they're green, then they're tostones. They're like plantain chips. Anyway, moving on.
Thank you, Noah. Joanna, what's your favorite Venezuelan food?
The arepa, obviously.
The arepa. Well, speaking of arepas, there's actually a war going on between Venezuela and Colombia. It's called the Arepa War. Yeah.
All right, well, we invented it.
Actually, Colombia invented it.
Venezuela invented it, just get over it.
Colombia invented it.
Que Venezuela, carajo, Venezuela.
Have you seen Encanto? Have you seen the arepas in Encanto?
Oh, an animated movie is going to be your factual standard? Come on.
Colombia la inventó ya, punto. Se acabó.
Ay, no, mira, que es que Colombia no la inventó. Mira, mi esposo es colombiano, él me ha dicho que la arepa es venezolana, ¿ok? Ahí está.
Punto,
Ahí
final.
está.
Well, whoever...
All right. Just to give a little translation of the whole scenario. The Colombian guy was saying that they invented it, and then was just going on saying, "Jesus, you are so stubborn. Accept it. We invented it. Period." Well, she was saying that, look, I have a husband who's Colombian, and he told me that the arepas were made in Venezuela. That's enough. Enough. End of discussion. So it's like a back and forth debate. Does it really matter where it was made? All I'm saying is that Venezuela has the best arepas. End of discussion.
Whoever invented it,
It's us.
it's clearly delicious and an integral part of your culture. Let's discuss more on what makes a Venezuelan in the next segment. So, Joanna, what is a Venezuelan?
There's a saying in Venezuela that goes, ese baila hasta el himno nacional, like here she even dances the national anthem. And I think that is very much the spirit of a Venezuelan. Like, we know how to party, we know how to have a good time. You know, there's like this joie de vivre.
The joy of life.
We're party animals.
Yeah. Well put, that was intense.
Well, it's only gonna get more intense. But first, my favorite, another motion graphic.
Your favorite graphic. The motion kind.
The motion kind.
First of all, Venezuela has a population of about 28 million, and since crisis times, the country has seen a sharp decline in population, as many have fled the country. When asked for the Venezuelan census, the majority, at about 51% of the population, claims to be moreno, a term that is similar to the word mestizo, which means something like a person with mixed European, native, and sometimes maybe even black ancestry, but there's no way to fully gauge the exact degree. From there, the next largest group, at about 43%, claim to be blanco, or white, Venezuelans, with the largest backgrounds coming from the Spanish, Portuguese, Italian, and Germans. From there, about 3% are Afro-Venezuelans, 2% are Amerindian, and the final 1% mostly belong to Asians like Chinese, Filipinos, Japanese, and Korean.
Yeah. In my case, I kind of formed that 43%. I actually have Italian and Spanish ancestry in a way. But yeah, I mean, I've noticed family members, friends, having very distinct, you could say like maybe mulatto kind of families, where we have, let's say, one brother could be a darker skin, or a sister could have a lighter skin. I mean, that really varies depending on the families. And that kind of represents the Moreno culture, sometimes a little bit black, sometimes white. It's just mixed. It's a mixed demographic in that sense. But what I was going to say is that the 43% here, it's mostly European, because we have people from Portugal, Spain, from Italy, from Germany. We have also an Arab-like culture as well. Since we have like Syrians and Lebanese also coming in. We do have a lot of Chinese also coming in, mainly because of the strong ties with the countries. But everyone else, that's pretty much it. So that's pretty accurate.
So I know what you're thinking. Yes, we'll get to the whole complicated crisis thing. But first, before we get to that, we're going to cover the basics.
Okay, the Bolivar is the official currency, but nobody really uses it anymore. And as we mentioned, the dollar is the unofficially adopted currency.
To be more specific, the Bolivar is still being used. It's just that it's kind of used almost as this, like petty change. Though people prefer to have US dollars because, that thing doesn't lose value, not as much. But we normally pay through debit cards. But still, I mean, the money just runs out pretty fast. Considering how everything has been dollarized, that also means that everything has gotten kind of expensive. Be it services, basic foods, other goods and needs. Everything has been kind of unofficially dollarized as a way to financially stabilize the country. That's the best way I can put it.
They use the types A and B plug outlets, and they drive on the right side of the road.
Spanish is the official language of Venezuela. However, Venezuelans have a very distinct Venezuelan accent.
Explain, Joanna.
We have this sort of Caribbean twang, and we don't really pronounce the S's. And instead of an S, we sort of sigh a lot. Yeah.
Yeah, we can get a little lazy with our pronunciations. And when she says that we have a sort of Caribbean twang, that's because our accent actually originates from the Canary Islands. It has that sort of island feel. That's why we kind of have like maybe the cleanest Spanish, the most understandable, but also it can get a little lazy in its pronunciation.
Like lo we say lo hoho.
La jojo.
La joña.
La hawa.
La hawa. La hawa.
That was in your video.
That was in my video.
I remember that, yeah.
Sometimes we can get lazy with the pronunciations like that. Other times, depending on the location, sometimes we mix the L's and the R's when we're pronouncing certain words. Like instead of saying doctor, sometimes we say doctor. Or sometimes like we mispronounce it like intentionally like that. But that's kind of like, I guess, like some of the low-class suburbs that kind of like associated that little underground slang of sorts. But yeah, most of the stuff that Joanna said, it's accurate, so.
Back.
By the way, guys, check out her videos on YouTube.
Check it out.
Yeah, why not?
Why not?
And just one more thing, explain, what is vaina?
Vaina is my favorite word. It's like the cardigan of words. It goes with everything. It's whatever you make of it. It's a thing, like that's a vaina. A party, let's go to that vaina.
It's an adjective.
It's an adjective. It's just, it can be anything.
Go to her vaina at this vaina by vaina-ing.
You could have a sentence that is 90% the word vaina and like it would be acceptable.
It's like clay, you can shape it into anything.
You can shape it.
Sí, búscame la vaina que te he puesto la vaina encima de la vaina en la vaina esa que tienes encima de la otra vaina. You find that thing that's over there, and that thing, and the other thing, and the other thing, and just next to that thing over there. That's basically what she means.
That's a beautiful way to put it. Yeah.
So anyway, otherwise, the government of Venezuela recognizes more than 30 indigenous languages, mostly used by people in the Amazonas state.
And there are certain areas that have linguistic communities, like in La Colonia Tovar, they speak a dialect of German called Alemán Coloniero. And close to the border of Brazil, you might hear more Portuguese being spoken.
There are some areas that do speak a little bit of English, myself included. I mean, we are trying to encourage more English speakers, mainly for the sake of tourism, and for the whole opportunity of like working abroad, moving out to other countries, English-speaking countries, and try to find a better living.
Religion. Somewhere around 88% of the country adheres to Christianity, mostly Catholic-based, whereas most of the Asian and Middle Eastern communities, like Lebanese, Syrian, Chinese, and Japanese, are either Muslim or Buddhist.
And
in my case, of course, I'm Roman Catholic, so yeah, it kind of falls into those categories.
Interestingly enough, Venezuela is also the home to the largest Druze community outside of the Middle East at about 60,000. And of course, a small community of Jews, which is why I'm here.
Yeah, there is a small community of the Jewish folk here. Again, during the World Wars, a lot of immigration. I at least know there are probably 2 synagogues in Caracas. From what I'm familiar with one of them. I haven't seen the other one. But considering how like ties have kind of been severed between the Venezuelan government and Israel, they kind of tended to favor more the Arab countries instead.
Okay, so now let's do this, the crisis and refugee thing. This is an insanely complicated topic that is not easily condensed, but let's try to give you the basics that you need to know.
For much of the 20th century, Venezuela was a thriving, stable, rich nation that many people were immigrating to. In fact, many people were coming into Venezuela as refugees during other conflict eras throughout Latin America.
So what happened, Joanna?
Oh, well, some might say the country started changing during the recession of the 80s and early 90s, but some might say it was the election of Chavez in 1998 and the Bolivarian Revolution.
It's all correlated. It all kind of started like in the mid to late 80s. There was a lot of political corruption. There was this scenario called the caracas, where there was just a lot of rioting and looting. I wasn't here at the time. I was actually in Florida when that occurred. But it was kind of this whole instability where it just got really really problematic. And I think even like soldiers had to like gun down a lot of people during the Caracaso incident, because there was just a lot of looting, a lot of rioting, and all because the economy just got a little bit out of control. But it doesn't compare to how crazy out of control they've gotten in more recent times. But then, of course, Chavez kind of stepped in during the 98 election and tried to, actually enforced a whole new different constitution, whole new different rules and regulations. He tried to kind of like rule the country his own way.
Which started the 5th Republic and the 27th Constitution of the country since the independence.
You guys have had 27 constitutions.
You know, what we lack in economic stability, we make up for in a number of constitutions.
Yeah. Now this is the controversial part, because you might get a wide range of responses when you ask Venezuelans what they think about all this, especially in regards to the whole Chavez thing. So Joanna, I've heard from some folk that Chavez, yes, he was charismatic in the beginning, you know, he appealed to the poor, and yes, in the beginning he and his party might have tried to do some good things like creating lots of initiatives for the poor. But then I also heard that, you know, there was the whole sending adversaries to jail and firing people from the PDVSA on live TV and taking over TV stations and censoring.
Funny story, the whole thing about him actually firing all the members from what we call PDVSA or PDVSA, he literally blew the whistle at these guys, called offside, named all these representatives, formally thanked them on live television, and personally fired each and every one of them on live TV. Just so he could put in his people to get involved in that company. He wanted to like enforce his own ruling even in the petroleum industry. So that caused a bit of an uproar, that caused strikes, that caused protests. It was a mess.
People, and it seems like all of this was an indication of the direction where things would be heading. Is that kind of accurate?
I would say that's accurate. Well, let's just say, soon the economy tanked and grocery shelves were empty. People were leaving the country, especially
Well, to give it a little more detail, the economy, it tried to recover like around 2007. Then by 2014, the economy started collapsing. 2010, 2013, yeah, like around that time. By 2016, 17, everything just went out of control. And, with food shortages, then other basic goods, other basic needs, it just led to people just saying, you know what, I'm out of here.
educated professionals, which caused brain drain. In 2013, it had the highest homicide and kidnapping rate in the world. Then in 2016, Maduro substituted the Supreme Court. And then there was an economic emergency decree that was approved and relegated Maduro to the legislative and executive powers, effectively giving him powers of all three branches of government. Goodbye checks and balances. This is why Guaido stepped in as interim president for the opposition, but to this day, the whole thing is still going on, and it's just, but that's a condensed version.
As for the whole Guaido thing, unfortunately, it didn't work out. He kind of stepped in and he assumed the power to be like this president of the country, but he became a sort of an interim president of the Constitution of the Assembly, and initially his run, like the first 6 months, he got a lot of popular support, but nothing really worked out after that. And eventually, they kind of like dissolved his powers, dissolved his duties, because things just weren't working. It just really wasn't working.
Next break.
Yes.
Joanna rants. Check out her videos on YouTube. Yeah, we could get into all the multi-layered complicated variables that played into what followed after this, like how the government allocated the budget funds and how they initiated a new fiscal policy that they thought would work, or how they made a ton of new laws. Long story short, it ended in all those things that you've probably already seen in the news. Venezuela had a very noticeable change.
And a lot of people have said, hey, the situation, at least economically, has since cooled off since the, dollarization. But, we do have the biggest refugee crisis in the world, and there's still a lot of suppression and oppression of the people of Venezuela. So
yeah, there's a lot of censorship here and there. You got to be careful with what you do or say in the open airwaves. Otherwise, some bad things might happen. So I'm hoping I don't get affected. There were even channels, TV channels that were closed down, radio stations that were closed down because of censorship, because they didn't agree with the leftist Bolivarian revolution stuff. It got really problematic.
do with that what you will.
In a sense, this is kind of what makes up a Venezuelan, a person who kind of sees all of this and has to figure out a way to move forward.
Yes, and that's why in Venezuela you always hear the word resuelve, okay? You gotta figure it out. Resolver. People will open up a bodega on their house window or have a restaurant in their living room. They always have to figure it out because they...
Mainly because we're survivors. We had to figure out how to make money somehow, some way. I mean, look at me. I'm an animator and I'm a YouTuber. This is my way of making an honest living, because it's hard for me to actually find a decent job here from time to time. I'm also good with other things. I can actually, I'm actually good at cooking. I'm good at a little bit of carpentry. Of course, me being an engineer, I'm good with networking. I'm good with computers. I'm good with video editing. My brother-in-law, for example, he works at construction. Usually works with like ceramics, home improvement kind of stuff, right? Reconstruction in that sense too. So we find ways to adapt, just find ways to survive and somehow make a living. I sometimes also do online commerce. I buy and sell things online as well, locally here. But yeah, we just try to find a way to make money any way we can, even if it means, let's say, cooking cakes just to sell them. Or opening up stores somehow. We just have to find a way to make money. That's the whole point. We figure something out. We think out of the box.
They have so many complications. They gotta be the masters of their
domain.
Life.
You can't like just sit there and complain. You gotta figure it out. They trade, bargain, loan. Half of the people have freelance side jobs, and everyone knows a guy that can fix your appliance or plumbing or
I also know a little bit of plumbing here and there. I sometimes have to do that on my own. I'm not much of a mechanic, but I do know how to fix a few things when it comes to cars. Like, for example, like jump starting a car. I know how to do that. I also know how to change a tire in a pinch in case of an emergency. So at least I know like some things here and there just to survive and make do with what we can.
They're licensed or not, you have to know how to circumvent crisis as a Venezuelan.
In that regard, though, I heard all this kind of also plays into Venezuelan humor, right, Joanna?
Oh my gosh. Venezuelans will casually joke or talk about the most morbid things as if it's like the most normal thing in the world.
For example, hey, do you remember Isabella?
Isabella got shot in the leg or kidnapped or ransomed.
Oh, no, that's Isadora. Isabella's the one whose house burned down, and then, you know, she broke her arm while she was trying to escape. Broken arm, Isabella. Yeah. So I was talking to her this morning, and, you know, while I was getting mugged, and her daughter wanted to give you these grapefruits.
Oh,
so,
broken arm Isabella.
Oh, she's the best.
Wow,
She's the best. I love that humor, though.
Yeah, we do have that kind of morbid sense of humor, so that is kind of accurate in a way.
Everyone has some kind of story that involves some kind of crazy thing they've experienced, so it's just like normal.
In any case, there's a lot of things that we could talk about when it comes to the Venezuelan identity, and one thing that definitely plays into this is the sports that they play.
To talk about more on that, it's art!
With the sports part.
All right, everyone, you ready for some camel racing and buzkashi?
Art, this is not the Uzbekistan episode.
This is not, all right.
They didn't appear in the previous
All
one.
right, so I guess this is sports of Venezuela. So it has been said that the two biggest sports in Venezuela are baseball and beauty pageants. That's right. But aside from that,
If you haven't noticed, I'm wearing a baseball shirt here, a jersey. This is from Los Leones de Caracas. So the Caracas Lions.
as of 2023, Venezuela racked up 21 Olympic medals. 3 of them are gold, 1 in boxing, 1 in women's triple jump, and the other, believe it or not, is fencing. But none of those sports even pales in comparison to the #1 sport Venezuela spends most of their time focusing on, baseball. Venezuela is one of the 4 Latin American baseball countries. Technically, Puerto Rico is considered as like the 5th member, but whatever. Throughout history, nearly
Puerto Rico's not a country, though. It's a commonwealth. It's just a U.S. territory, but whatever, fine.
400 Venezuelan players have been recruited into the MLB. Some of the most popular and notable famous players that you have probably heard of include these guys right here. I mean, wait, out of that list, I know...
Miguel Cabrera's one of the more famous ones. We also have Pablo Sandoval, which was on that list, a.k.a. Kung Fu Panda. Let's see, Omar Vizquel, Andrés Galarraga, Alex Cabrera, who was that guy that was in this controversial scenario where he had this near perfect game only for the umpire to kind of take it away from him because it was a very close call at first base. Just look up the video of Alex Cabrera's like near perfect game. It's frustrating.
You know Miguel Cabrera?
Yeah.
Who does he play for?
I forgot.
Miguel Cabrera.
I know, right? Miguel Cabrera.
Miguel Cabrera.
The point is, he's Venezuelan, and we've taken way too much time on him. Everyone knows the rivalry between these two teams.
Right here,
they
baby.
Go crazy. Baseball is so rude.
Yeah, the whole thing between Leones del Caracas and Navegantes Magallanes, I would compare that to like a Yankees and Red Sox scenario because these guys are eternal rivals.
Rooted in their culture that they even have phrases that they use everyday life that are baseball oriented, like entre y dos, meaning you're on thin ice.
Entre y dos, yeah.
And this is your last chance. Or me ponchaste, meaning I have no clue what you're saying.
Me ponchaste is like you struck me out. It's like ponchao, punch out, like strike out. That's kind of where it came from. There's another term that's not exactly used here, and it would be fuera de base. Me agarraste fuera de base. That means you caught me off guard or you caught me off base.
Now, of course, Venezuelans do like football to some extent, but as of today, they're the only country from the CONMEBOL nations who have never qualified for a World Cup.
We are pushing to have our team at least participate in the upcoming World Cup. Politically speaking, it might happen. That's because I think the 2026 World Cup, the one that's going to take place in the US, Canada, and Mexico. From my understanding, instead of it being a 32-team bracket, they're going to expand it to 48. Meaning that there is a chance to actually have more players, more teams, more excitement, and even more confusion regarding to the whole tournament. But it would be cool to actually see the team in action during the World Cup. Even if they don't pass the first round, I'm okay with it. But I'm just hoping for the best. I mean, I think there was like a sub-17 World Cup where they did phenomenally well, and they were actually at the finals, but they lost. Like they reached like second place. It was a sub-17 category. And I think that was like in 2019. That was impressive. I never thought a Venezuelan football team, I'm not calling them soccer, I'm sorry, a Venezuelan FIFA football team would actually get that far. And it was like, I think, a sub-17 team. My hat's off to them. But anyway.
This, of course, might change with new expansion rule for FIFA 2026. Let's see what happens. At the time of filming this episode, it hasn't happened yet, so for those of you who have traveled into the future or from the future, and you know the answer to this, please let us know in the comments. Fun fact, one Venezuelan cross-country, I keep wanting to say cross-dresser, cross-dressing skier. This keeps getting worse. Cross-country skier, Adrian Solano, was funded by the GoFundMe campaign by a Finnish television host to participate in the 2017 FIS Nordic World Ski Championship. And he had never seen snow before. Oh my God. Oh.
Too many words.
Look, Venezuelans will find a way to do the impossible. Like, I've seen people even go to Mount Everest. Venezuelans. No joke. They actually went to Mount Everest.
Too much crossing of words.
Words are not your thing.
Yeah. Well, on that awkward note, it's time for me to go. So thank you guys for having me. And I'm going to get back to Uzbekistan. So bye, guys.
Thank you, Art.
So yeah, baseball and beauty pageants, Venezuelans are competitive.
Also, I heard there's a weird thing you guys do in Venezuela. Like, you give weird names to your kids. Is that true? Like...
The names are so freaking weird. Okay, I'm gonna give you some examples of names I've heard. Nebraska, Taj Mahal, Elvis Presley, Walt Disney World.
And also, don't you guys like take English words and make them into names too sometimes?
Like yes, I do.
By the way, funny story, I actually know a friend of my dad was actually called Richard Nixon. No joke. He was literally called Richard Nixon.
Give me Juan Hundred.
Juan Hundred.
Yeah, the names can get pretty weird sometimes. It's this whole belief that you want to give your child an original name. It's kind of like a stupid concept in a way, but to each their own. I prefer more traditional names, personally. But people just love to joke around with these weird names. It's hard to take them seriously.
Yeah, also, didn't like the Venezuelan government like approve of a superhero based off of the president and his wife, and they fight like monsters and stuff?
Yes.
And like they even made it into an action
I hate
figure
it.
that they sell to kids.
It's
and
true.
Stuff like that.
Yeah.
Well, there's that and a lot of other interesting facts about Venezuelan culture. And to cover that
cringe.
topic, here is Hannah with the culture stuff.
Hi guys, I'm back. And I have a baby.
Cute.
This is Robin, Geography Now, baby.
Does look like Ian, dang.
Mini Ian. All right. Okay, so we're gonna go down the list of some things you guys, the Venezuelans, suggested we mention in regards to Venezuelan culture. And I'm gonna read it off the teleprompter. First thing, you wanna point to something in Venezuela? You use your lips. Imitate.
So basically, it's like this. Like pointing out, like you're puckering up to someone. That's just kind of like a sort of like body language that we developed unconsciously. It's pretty funny.
Honey, what does that mean? Second, speaking of lips, beauty is a whole industry in Venezuela. Like, it's not even funny. It's a viable career path that women take very seriously. And there are multiple training facilities that focus on pageantry. There's even a documentary you can watch called Beauty Factory.
For further details, Venezuela is very proud of their beautiful women here. I think I could probably associate it with a movie called Miss Congeniality, where Michael Caine plays this charismatic, let's say charismatic person who like wants to work at like a beauty pageant and is trying to teach Sandra Bullock's character how to become feminine, how to become a woman. So he almost feels like he's like the Osmer Sosa. He's like the beauty pageant leader of sorts. So I recommend you watch Miss Congeniality. It's a dumb movie, but it's dumb fun.
This, of course makes sense when you consider that they have won more international beauty
True.
pageant titles than any other country in the world. They even have the only back-to-back Miss Universe winners. Another thing they are known for, their nicknames for regional peoples. Gochos, the hard-working country folk. Llaneros are the tough, fast-talking cowboys. And Maracuchos are people from the Zulia area with a no-nonsense confidence, and they can party pretty hard.
I can at least, from experience, I know gochos and I know maracuchos. The gochos, they can sometimes maybe not get used to like the city lifestyle, but they're respectable. The maracuchos, they're very no nonsense people. I've like on 2 occasions I can say for a fact that I had one that was a teacher in the university and I had one that was a boss, and they are no nonsense people, and they're a little hard to work with. I'll say that.
I think I could get along with these Zulians. In fact, Zulians are probably the most distinct cultural people in Venezuela. They even at one point flirted with the idea of independence.
That's
Side
true.
note, the Caribbean coast is where much of the Afro-Venezuelans can be found. In the Yaracuy area, Venezuela has a branch of Santeria that worships Maria Leonza, one of 3 deities who has the ability to talk to animals, and she also rides on a magic tapir.
I should point out that statue was actually damaged at one point. They tried to restore it, I think, a few years ago. But I think they managed to repair and restore it, yeah.
The most colorful event would probably be during Corpus Christi, where you can see the dancing devils, Diablos Danzantes. Did I say that right?
You said it right. Yeah.
Wow. It is inscribed by UNESCO as a heritage of humanity. Otherwise, Venezuelans have lots of accolades to boast about. For example, so obviously malaria is a really bad thing, and Venezuela was one of the first countries to eradicate malaria.
I wish we could do the same thing with dengue, because I actually had dengue when I was a teenager, and that was a rough experience. Still, mosquitoes, they are a big problem here.
In Latin America. Whoop whoop. Also, Dr. Juancito Convit developed the leprosy vaccine.
That is
and
true.
Felix Pifano founded treatments for various tropical diseases, which no one wants those. In the arts, you have famous writers like these guys, Romulo Gallegos, probably being the most notable one.
Yep.
So many painters like these guys, Arturo Michelena, probably having the most renowned career.
See, the portrait that is shown on the right is called Miranda en la Carraca. That's Francisco de Miranda, and Arturo Michelena, he painted it to make it look like he was kind of like frustrated in a jail cell, because, you know, there was a lot of political backstabbing during the War of Independence that he was eventually turned into the Spanish, and all I know is that he died in jail, and his body was thrown in a mass grave, and there's no way to identify where his body ended up being.
And in cinema, it is said that the Venezuelan golden era of film was in the 70s and 80s. The film When I Want to Cry, I Don't Cry by Mauricio Wallerstein was a huge box office hit, and many say it was the beginning of the new Venezuelan cinema movement.
Now, I haven't really seen that movie. It was before my time. But yeah, Venezuelan movies have gotten a sort of a resurgence in more recent times. Sometimes they actually show something a little more raw and gritty. Because there was one movie called Simon that's kind of talking about the whole refugee crisis and how one guy was one guy had to seek asylum because he went through this PTSD because he was a torture victim during the protests. Rough movie, but it got critically acclaimed. It didn't get an Oscar nomination though.
And of course, you can't have movies without a film score. And with that, we now go to an actual Venezuelan to explain the music of Venezuela. Say hello to Enoch.
Gracias, Panita, and hola, ¿qué tal? Mi nombre es Enoch, and they also call me Enochian, and that is my artist name.
Just a quick little note. When he says pana or panita, that's just our way of saying friend. ¿Cómo está mi pana? Épale, panita. Like, what's up, buddy? What's up, pal? But that's what it means.
Venezuelan music. So, if you want the shortest summary of the famous Venezuelan sounds, this is what you need to know. Number 1, Alma Llanera, which is the second national anthem.
Why is it the second one? You
know? Well, the main anthem is called Gloria al Bravo Pueblo, Glory to the Brave People. Alma Llanera, mainly because of its folkloric roots, we sometimes associate it as a second national anthem, because it just feels like it more accurately depicts our culture. Well, the main national anthem is more patriotic. Alma Llanera is more folkloric.
It's just a good anthem. I don't know. It's been practiced in Venezuela for many years. Number 2, Caballo Viejo. Number 3,
Old Horse.
Moliendo Café. Then on the east side
Grounding
and
coffee.
the coast, you have calypso and tambore music. You should definitely see how the women dance to the tambores. It looks something like... Okay, never mind. I'm not the best dancer.
Oh, you almost had that.
Just
Come on.
search it online. You'll see it. Then you have the Zulia region, where my family is from, Maracaibo. And we also have Christmas music that was invented in Maracaibo, Venezuela, called Las Gaitas. Gustavo Aguado. A huge influence in what is simply called guacos, the innovators of Las Gaitas. All right, even though there's a lot of African Caribe influence in Venezuela, most Venezuelans will say the national music and dance comes from Los Llanos, the flatlands of the center of the country. Like the national dance, the joropo. Everybody knows Simon Diaz, aka Tio Simon.
When they mention joropo, it's like a national, very popular folkloric dance, but we also have like a saying here, which is kind of funny. It's like, it goes something like this. Al ponerse las alpargatas, porque lo que viene es joropo. What does that mean? Put on your dancing shoes on because it's time to dance. It's time to get serious.
The joropo. Everybody knows Simon Diaz, aka Tio Simon, who is probably the biggest name in musical llanera.
Folklore.
And of course, the best for last, my music. Go check it out, Enochian, right here at the bottom. No, I'm just kidding. I'm not famous yet. But for real, these are the styles that every Venezuelan will point you towards if you ask them about Venezuelan music. We even have a public orchestra system called El Sistema, which gives instruments to children for free if they cannot afford them, which is really nice. It was used as a program to unite people all around music and helped young people get out of poverty and crime. And
they forgot to mention Dudamel, who is this orchestra conductor, very famous, probably more recognized for his hair, in a sense, but he is internationally renowned orchestra conductor, so hats off to him. Other bands that weren't exactly referenced here, one common pop band that we have here is Caramelos de Cianuro, and it's like pop, punk rock, very popular here, modern pop. We also have another band that's internationally recognized as Los Amigos Invisibles, the Invisible Friends, and they're more like ska, pop, acid funk, very tropical sounds. We have another one called Desorden Público. That's more ska, but it's sort of like an urban feel to it. There are just so many to talk about, but there's just very little time. Also, there was another one called Ali Primera, mostly folkloric. Ricardo Montaner, if we're talking, let's say, in this case, ballads. Or if we're talking Jose Luis Rodriguez, El Puma. They're just, I mean, the list goes on and on. There are just so many to name. There just wasn't enough time for all of them.
And no instrument is more iconic than the Venezuelan cuatro, which looks like a small guitar, but it's a little different with its own technique and its own sound.
Yes.
But in the modern contemporary sense, Venezuela is still pumping out lots of mainstream music. We have notable artists like Elena Rose, Danny Ocean, Jerry D, con el canción Caracas en el 2000. Ah, qué chévere fueron las cosas cuando el bolo estaba a mil. Oh, and let's not forget myself, of course. Enochian, one of the latest originals, Lo Pasamos Bien, El Remix.
Guys, seriously, check him out. He's got good stuff.
Also, they forgot to mention that reggaeton kind of exploded here too. It got super popular in the early 2000s. And I think that the duo Chino y Nacho is probably like the most recognized reggaeton duo so far. But they went for a more modern approach here when it came to music, so I can completely understand that.
If you like, music and he does this stuff, he knows his stuff.
Bueno, gracias a todos, and I hope you really enjoyed checking out the music of Venezuela.
Thank you, guys. Well, that was quite the summary on what it means to be a Venezuelan.
And it didn't even scratch the surface. There's so much more, but this video is already long enough as it is. I mean, I talked a lot. Venezuelans talk a lot. Yes, here we are.
But we're not done. To see how the rest of the world sees Venezuelans, let's go to the final segment. What is it, Joanna?
The friend zone.
So, like all countries, Venezuela can't do everything alone. They do have to interact with other people in the world.
And with Venezuela, the story of diplomacy gets kind of interesting because it kind of depends on whether you look at it from the political on paper side or the everyday Venezuelan citizens and diaspora side of things.
Let's explain more in something Joanna really loves.
A motion graphic.
The best type of graphic.
It's because it's emotion.
So first off, let's talk about on paper. Since the Chavez years, the Venezuelan government has shifted their leanings towards nations that have similar political ideologies. In 2006, Russia signed a nearly $3 billion arms deal and restructured their debt with Venezuela, declaring numerous times that they would use their UN Security Council status to block any resolutions that aim to suspend Venezuela. In addition, Venezuela became the third nation to officially recognize the independence of Russian-backed breakaway republics of Abkhazia and South Ossetia. On that,
then those claims were kind of backed out. So it's kind of really hard to say like if they actually support them or not.
No, China has been a huge lender, mostly for development projects in exchange for future oil shipments as well. They even launched their first joint satellite in 2008, Venesat-1.
Yes.
The only issue is, much of the relationship depends on how well Venezuela can keep up with their payments, as recently they've been defaulting quite a few times, and as of 2023, the debt is estimated to be somewhere around $10 billion. Regardless, like Russia, they've expressed similar concerns in regards to using their UN Security Council votes in favor for Venezuela.
I'm just concerned that we still have strong ties with China. I mean, I don't know if at some point they're gonna put their foot down and just gonna say, "Where's my money?" So that's what worries me, financially speaking.
Closer to home, you could also look at the ALBA Alliance, a 10-country member alliance including Cuba, Nicaragua, and Bolivia. These 4 countries are the closest ideologically in their political leanings, and they typically work closely together. Chavez even described Fidel Castro as his mentor, and Nicaragua's Daniel Ortega and Chavez were also good friends. Cuba is also a major source of importing medical, education, and engineer professionals to Venezuela.
Keep in mind that Fidel Castro had strong ties with Chavez. That led to a sort of a leftist revolution, a pink tide of sorts, as some people have categorized it. How like not just Venezuela, but other countries in South America were going for a socialist or social democratic political leaning government in a way.
If you ask the everyday Venezuelans and Venezuelan diaspora, though, it really depends because there are so many ties all over the world. Some might say Spain, and more specifically the Canary Islands. In fact, Venezuela is sometimes called the 8th Canary Island, as many of the people from Venezuela are descended from Canary Islanders. And today, much of the Venezuelan culture and dialect is similar to that of the Canary Islands. Most Venezuelans will give a country that is usually within the Americas or Caribbean. Many Venezuelans ended up migrating to places like the Dominican Republic, Peru, Chile, Ecuador, Argentina, Uruguay. I've heard good reports of.
They did forget to mention Brazil, but most of the diaspora I've heard of course, one country that's not mentioned here, but it's going to be mentioned in the next part, Colombia. Of course, we have a diaspora in Argentina, Dominican Republic, of course, Chile, Peru, Ecuador, Uruguay. I mean, we during the whole crisis, everyone just went wherever they could just to find a new life.
Venezuelans feeling happy and welcomed in most of these countries. Many, of course, have migrated to the USA, specifically to Miami. The USA and
Miami, and there's this other city called Weston that's becoming sort of like a Venezuelan, I think, enclave. Is that the term? It's like this little small area where it's just full of Venezuelan people, Venezuelan cultures. It's just a common little town, a little Venezuela, if you will.
Venezuela used to have a close relationship in the 20th century, but then it all kind of deteriorated once.
I should point out that when I lived in the U.S., I mostly lived in Florida. I was in Kendall at one point. Then I lived in Fort Lauderdale at one point. Then I moved to Boca Raton. And then I moved back here. So I didn't exactly live in Weston, but we probably met some people there, or met people that were living in that area. But seeing how Venezuelan communities are, it's not uncommon to hear the term Weston in Florida.
Since the Chavez years came up, but in the 2015 Obama years, a direct channel of communication was established, beginning talks for a possible re-establishing of relations. However, when it comes to their best friend, almost every Venezuelan I've talked to has said one country, Colombia.
I forgot to mention in the earlier part with Obama, the U.S. Embassy has been closed ever since 2019. I believe I mentioned this earlier. Unfortunately, ever since the blackouts, I mean, we're trying to see if we can somehow reactivate that embassy, but things got really complicated when we're trying to apply for visas, because that usually means that in our cases, when we want to apply for a U.S. visa, we have to literally go to another country to apply for the visa. In this case, it's like me going to Mexico or me going to Colombia to apply for a U.S. visa or something like that. Same thing with the Canadian visa. It got really complicated since both embassies have been shut down here, and it's hard to find another alternative unless you have, let's say, a European passport, which you should be able to bypass certain things with that. I don't know. Hopefully. But we'll see.
Was established, beginning talks for a possible re-establishing of relations. However, when it comes to their best friend, almost every Venezuelan I've talked to has said one country, Colombia. No one understands Venezuelans more than Colombians. When Colombia had a crisis, Venezuela took in Colombian refugees with open arms. Likewise, Colombia returned the favor and has taken in more Venezuelan refugees than any other nation. They share so many cultural nuances, they intermarry and have kids with each other so frequently that it's kind of like a blur and hard to even tell where the Colombia starts and the Venezuela ends. They love each other.
Look, we may have a lot of disputes when it comes to politics, sports, and even food. But at the end of the day, Colombia has always been Venezuela's closest brother. Colombia and, of course, Ecuador. So, the Gran Colombia Pact, the group of countries that were associated with that, essentially we are the closest with Colombia. So They've helped us out when we are in a crisis. We've helped them out in the past when they went through a crisis. So we are very close in that sense. We do help each other out.
All right, and with that, in conclusion, obviously, Joanna, you are the Venezuelan. I'm going to give this to you. I am out of here.
What? Okay. Venezuela's in the news a lot. There's political instability, there's economic, all these things. But Venezuela is a beautiful country with so much diversity and culture and beauty. And honestly, the nicest, coolest people you can imagine. Sometimes when you look at a place, you gotta forget about its illness and just look at the person behind the illness. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it's like a colorful hurricane.
That is what my therapist calls me.
Well, Joanna, it's such an honor to have you. Seriously, I've been in contact with you for like what, 5-6 years or something.
You wrote to me 5 years ago.
Like I knew she had to be the one for this episode. It's crazy. So
here we are.
Such an honor to have you in this episode. And Joanna, what's you want to introduce the next country episode?
Yeah, it's Good Morning Vietnam.
Cheers. Stay cool. Stay tuned.
Yeah, a nice Robin Williams reference there. But yeah, I mean, she isn't too far off with the whole thing about Venezuelans. We're very sociable people. We're very nice. We're very proactive. We just want to be part of the group. We want to be incorporated. We want to help out. But of course, when it comes to, let's say, politics and sports, we can get a little heated. We can get a little angry. Maybe a little proud in regards of certain views and all that. We try to be part of the group, right? We still want to hang out with you guys. Regardless of our political opinions, we just want to have fun. We just want to entertain. We just want to meet new friends. And just try to find a way to make a living and enjoy ourselves. So I hope you guys enjoyed this video. Leave a comment if you want. Don't forget to like, share, subscribe. And I'll see you in the next video. I was glad to make this video here in particular because I wanted you guys to know the importance of my country, of where I came from, where I currently live, and how my culture is. So I hope you guys enjoyed the little feedback here, adding extra context of the of this video that I did take part in when it came to the additional research. I did mention that I didn't get directly credited, but that doesn't matter. I did it for a good cause. I'm just glad that the video was very well received. There were a few flaws. Doesn't matter. We all make mistakes. So, if you're interested in geography, check out Geography Now. If you want to check out Joanna Hausman's work, check out her videos. Her channel is also on YouTube. And I'll see you guys in the next video. So, take care. See ya. Bye.